Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to another Chris Chan Quickie article. And it must be said, we've spent the last couple of days actually talking about the the overall level of just things that Chris has wrong about Sonichu. Well, things wrong in terms of the things he establishes, from Quickville to the chaotic combo to the way he's tried to create his own species, which would probably be the most unique aspect to Chris's methodology. Unfortunately, Chris doesn't really seem to invoke anything new or original, despite being true and honest. And one of the most egregious examples of this lack of activity comes from one Courtney, aka Project SNT. So, let's go. There is something deeper than that just sets off my subconscious worse than that moment at too many games where I went hedgehog. Yes, worse than that. Oh yeah, you mean the thing you did, Chris? The thing that was your fault? So why on earth... Whatever. This resonated a reminder in my subconscious that was like hell to me, and I am still racking my brain trying to figure out why for myself. I'll tell you why, Chris. It's because for some reason you are trying to tell yourself that you are completely free from responsibility for what you did. Neck down, the image is not offensive to me at all. Neck up, triggered. This is Chris on Project SNT's Wild Sonichu redesign. Oh, we will be getting to that shortly. Meanwhile, I really don't care what Chris Chan says. Project SNT taking a deliberate and a fairly a very blunt response, if you ask me, and quite frankly, I do not blame her. Meanwhile, Project SNT, aka Courtney or just SNT, is an artist known for revisiting her old school Sonic OC SNT, redesigning other Sonic OCs and characters, and voice acting. She monetizes such projects on her Patreon account. In 2018 and again in 2019, Project SNT exploited Chris's infamy by promoting projects on her Patreon to redesign his characters. Among her artwork is a redesign of Wild Sonichu, known as Wild Sonirusu, a combination of a Sonic character and the Pokemon Pachirisu, an electric squirrel Pokemon with a large bushy tail. Included as part of a larger artwork depicting the chaotic combo as having more diverse origins than simply being recolors of the original Sonichu and Rosechu. Chris, triggered over the design because why not, tried to guilt trip Courtney into scrapping it. He changed his reasoning for disliking the design multiple times. First saying he was bothered over the tail, then that the designs reminded him of characters from Sonic Boom. Then, that his disturbance was due to the dimensional CS89 calling him for help. And finally, that the design reminded him of a race of fantasy characters. Courtney intends to ignore Chris's tantrum, as did literally all of us. Despite this, Chris has continued to stalk her, where he has been seen attempting to contact her through liking many of her posts and responding to many others. As though we're just going to pretend this entire little episode just didn't happen. However, attitudes on earlier redesigns. Just watch this video. I appreciated and like her redesign. She did really well for her own Sonichu and Rosechu interpretations. A year before the Wild Sonichu redesign, Project S&T had done redesigns of Sonichu and Rosechu. Chris approved of those designs, interpreting them as Project S&T discovering new species of the electric hedgehog Pokemon, even congratulating Project S&T on her fair to good designs. However, because you know praise from Chris cannot last very long, if at all, he didn't take kindly to her critiques of his Sonichu and Rosechu designs, stating that he simply drew them how he saw them when he looked into the sister dimension. I literally saw Rosie like that when I discovered her. Everything in the first appearance as she was, in our sister dimension. I drew her as she was, and is. I have the very strong psychic link to our sister dimension, had it all of my life. So yes, no need for the questions of why I drew my son and my Rosie as I saw them. Now what you're going to notice from this is that Chris literally is making a lot of fuss over, quite frankly, nothing. Nobody cares, Chris, but you are under the impression we do. I don't know why you have that impression, but guess what? We don't. Chris versus Courtney's Wild Sonny-Risu. On the 6th of December 2019, the Project SNT Twitter unveiled a redesign of the chaotic combo. An upset Chris replied in only one way he knew how, pointing the fingers and saying absolute horse hockey. I only wish I could like this, but I am really unable to. Neglecting to actually explain his issue with the art. Responding to an unrelated tweet with one of his enablers, Chris stated, I am not replying to this. To move my reply down the tweet wall because something seriously triggered me. No, no. Although Chris proceeded to casually make a few more unrelated tweets. Returning to the Project SNT Twitter chain, Chris replied to enablers asking him what the issue was, simply with a reaction gif reading, triggered, before casually commenting on other subjects. The following day, Chris, while sick with a urinary tract infection, made several bizarre and disjointed Yoda-style word salad tweets, still vaguely criticizing the redesign. Pain. And also, I'm not going to do the Yoda voice, I'm just going to say it as is. Feel well, I not. Rest need I. Hurts head. UTI up acting. P wanting to. No feeling not I well am. Yes, recover I be well. Super stressed ears, Pachirisu round face to get me. Email received, hashtag Project SNT, vent with. Expected Courtney to did than better than I. Napkin, lightning heart lightning. You are a pathetic child, Chris. Honestly, this literally is tantamount to like a child throwing a tantrum, and you know what? It's not funny, and it's straight up pathetic. That's the thing. Honestly, this entire debacle kind of proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that Chris is just straight up pathetic. I know you probably didn't need to hear that from me, but just in case it wasn't clear enough, there you go. Chris is just pathetic. Replying to enablers asking him what was wrong. Night last troubling still me. Up shook I am not only still, virus possible, rest need I, bed in I am, else to everyone, one laugh you all, this serious is very. And to a tweet chain with Project SNT. Like this eye, ears me killed Pachirisu roundface. Job good drawing unusual as, expected triggered, I not did. Check did email you are I pray have. Safe, good, and have day ah. A few hours later, Chris gave up on the charade and resumed typing as normal. Thank God for that. Claiming that, my brain was literally out of order earlier. I was unable to make coherent sentences through my hands. It was not on possible. I'm recovering, but I am feeling ill. A fan asked if he was upset over people liking the chaotic combo redesign better than the original, to which Chris denied, saying he was triggered bad overseeing the design. On Project SNT's YouTube video of the redesign, Chris commentated, "This video triggered me bad. Nothing to do with the comments or opinions of others, or her drawing style. But yeah, a lot of the choices on the redesigns triggered me bad. Ugh." Later, during a live stream promoting his custom TSSF cards, Chris finally stated his reason for throwing a tantrum over the redesign, saying he was bothered over Wild Sonichu having a poofy tail, instead of having the original leafy tail, because it meant he wouldn't be able to glide very well. Then again, Emolga, another squirrel-type Pokemon from Generation 5, actually could fly. Or glide, I should say. So, Chris, you do know flying squirrels do exist, right? Ironically, the ability to fly with his tail, while canon, is extremely minor even in the comics, as Wild is never directly shown using the power. By the 10th of December, Project SNT had not responded to Chris's messages on the subject. Good. Chris tried to guilt trip her, however, by using his ongoing illness. I'm still learning my better magics and powers. I have been able to stave off the viral infections for months. The virus snuck in when I was hyper-stressed from being extensively triggered by Project SNT's redesign video. Chris blaming an artist for his inability to cope with a character's design changes. Yeah. He tagged her again in a rant, hoping for a desperate response. Good morning. I am still recovering. The virus is being stupid, but I'm physically pushing it away. Yet it decided to attack my throat again. At least my voice is not shot again. But I would not be in this infected situation if I was not overly stressed from being triggered last Friday night by certain redesign choices. I may sound selfish, and I do not personally blame Project SNT for triggering my brain, but I kinda wish she would acknowledge my response. So you are blaming her then? As I had emailed her directly, my feelings, and the fact that the ordeal allowed a cold virus to get to me as badly as it did. I respect her as a fellow original creator, a good artist, and a kind-hearted individual. I feel like I need to talk and sort this problem out with her as soon as possible. No, Chris, you need to sort yourself out. That's what you need to do. Stop trying to put this on other people. I ask all of you to please not troll, hate on, or pester her at all. Don't worry, Chris. We know. We get that. I do not pester others. Bollocks. And I typically untag them if I need be. I would hashtag them, but to be more direct, I felt need to directly @tag, that is all. A fan tried to persuade Chris he was in the wrong by using his own logic about OCs against him. Chris dismissed the message partway through with, "Not now, please." Wow, rude much? Stewing on the matter further, Chris replied to a fan calling him out for being the only one triggered. Well, I did get epic triggered from Project SNT's poor redesign choices on 4 out of 5 of them. They actually are moreover separate individuals than redesigns, which does throw me off. The only exception is the punchy Sonichu redesign, the worst culprit being the wild Sonichu redesign. He needs his leaf for better gliding and flight than a large tail could ever do, and Sonichu ears are typically long. And yet, regardless of this, apparently there is something deeper than this that just sets off my subconscious worse than that moment at Too Many Games, where I went hedgehog. Worse than that. This resonated a reminder in my subconscious that was like hell to me, and I am still racking my brain trying to figure why for myself. Neck down, the image is not offensive to me at all. Neck up, triggered. I cannot even look at it directly. It freaking bothers me worse than hell. The only theory I can gather is that it reminds me of someone of really awful intentions or design. But at the moment, at Project S&T, it badly reminds me of Dave the Intern and Justin Bieber. Do you think anybody cares, or do you think Chris is just trying to find problems with this? Because I don't think Chris has come to the conclusion that he knows what he thinks. Because let's be honest, Chris doesn't. That's the sad truth. Chris does not know what he's talking about. I'm still letting the why question stew in my subconscious as I continue to meditate and continue onward until when the answer comes to me. Meanwhile, the damn cold is partly affecting my brain. It could be worse, believe me. Some would argue they wish it was worse, but it was sadly not to be. Rationalizations and attempts to get SNT to respond. Go figure, a subconscious trigger event being a call for help from another dimension. On the 11th of December, after having retreated to his imaginary fantasy land, Chris came up with a rationalization to his problem with the redesigns. Instead of acknowledging the actual issue with his immature mentality was the sole problem, Chris invented a rationalization based on his CPU Blue Heart Goddess delusions and lore from the Hyperdimension Neptunia series and Dungeons & Dragons. the latter having been cited as inspiration by Project SNT in her redesigns. Yes, let's have Chris suddenly now dictate what on earth, S&T can take inspiration from, or what she can design of her own volition. Oh dear. Chris deluded himself into believing that he had been triggered because of a disturbance in the Dungeons & Dragons home dimension that required his goddess input to prevent a disaster. Hey y'all, update on this cold. It's giving me nasal problems now, and it still lingers in my throat. It does not feel as bad as earlier. Also, I have found the reasoning behind the triggering from @Project SNT's redesign of the chaotic combo. There was a disturbance in their Dungeons & Dragons-like home dimension of CS89, which is literally the main home of Pludia and Pishi in their CPU leadership over Plane Platoon there. Anyway, there have been a number of migrations of individuals and items from CS89 and C197, fated or forced. A bit like this message, really. Even entire dungeon cave areas were being relocated via heavy magic from there. I'm projected there as a cleric, working on analyzing and finding the solutions before something really bad could happen to CS89. This seems to be the right path, as I am finding less visual offense with Magi-chan Sonola differences. Not triggering, go figure, a subconscious trigger event being a call from help from another dimension. Anywho, I'm about to go get some food for this body. I'll check you back later. That evening, Chris tried to bait Project S&T into applying to him by offering to collaborate with her on his custom TSSF cards, posting a TSSF card appropriating her OC design. Thank you, Chris, and we didn't realize you needed to approve of something. Thank God we're saved. I finally drew SNT, although it ended up being a chronicling of a chat she and I had about a couple of months ago. Also, Alt Dimension Solitudes and Rose Chews @Project SNT has drawn is an idea for a TSSSF expansion pack. If she would like to collab a bit on it, she has my email. Notably, the lore on the card features a strange attempt at flattering Project SNT. She and I enjoyed a pleasant conversation. I even pointed out her inhabitual attraction when it went off. I was immune to it. What? Project S&T, however, maintained a distance and did not respond. You may want to take notes, guys, because this is exactly what you should do. On the 13th of December, only 12 days before Christmas, Chris again tried to justify his tantrum, shifting his rationale to claiming that the redesign reminded him of the Rocat, a race of fantasy characters created by Jacob Sockness. By the way, @Project SNT, I found out what it was about Wild Solitude's face and tail that was really bugging me. Turns out he reminded me of one of the Rocat grunts. Apparently, CS89 was getting its magical items stolen. We managed to resolve the problem, and I can look at Sonny Risu without even flinching anymore. Finally, go figure the ordeal that such an event was giving me warning over. Glad I investigated. But that evening, Chris turned up the obnoxiousness further, replying to Project S&T's original tweet on the chaotic combo with more of his new power fantasy. I've had to personally journey to Dimension CS89 to resolve the problem of the D&D magic resources being stolen. At least I've leveled myself up as a cleric, and I get to pull a style similar to one that I like from Soul Calibur, another hefty mission for a goddess like me. 2 hours later, having had no success in getting Project SNT to respond, Chris tried turning to an apology. I want to publicly announce that I am really sorry for how I reacted to @Project SNT's redesigns here. They are very good, and so is her video. You know, it has only just occurred to me that perhaps the only reason Chris apologized at all was just to get Project SNT to respond. Yeah, funny about that, isn't it? Anyway, on the 15th of December, 10 days before Christmas Day, Chris checked Project SNT's Twitter page, presumably to see if she had commented about him. While there, he liked tweets that were at the top of her page, including a pinned tweet from 2 years before. On the 16th, excuse me, on the 16th of December, Project SNT retweeted another artist's fan art of solitary characters playing Dungeons and Dragons. Chris again tagged Project SNT, desperate for a response and letting his passive-aggressive slide shine through. I love this. This D&D team is fully approved personally at Project SNT. Although, if you're still upset at me, I can understand and empathize, and I still apologize for my initial outbursts. Please respond. Let me know how you are feeling now. Well, Chris, since you demanded so aggressively following your curt and uncouth behavior, no. On the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas, YouTuber Dylan Thomas released a video discussing DMs Chris had sent him about Project SNT. In those, Chris stated that his belief that SNT had been forced into helping him battle interdimensional evils. SNT herself was force transported there as well as to help with her situation. She and I took out the Rocat operation that was going on there and saved a falling apart CS-89. In essence, Chris extended his power fantasy to include Project SNT as an imaginary friend, since the real one refused to act as an enabler, and refused to just play ball generally for that matter. You think Courtney regretted doing this because Chris was just such an obnoxious prick? Yeah, I think so. On the 4th of January 2020, Chris pledged money to Project SNT on Patreon. A perk for pledging is to receive an invite to Project SNT's Discord server, which Chris took advantage of. Suggesting Project SNT ignoring him over Twitter had gotten under his skin, so much that he decided to throw money at her to try getting his foot in the door via Discord instead. OpusCon 789. On the 11th of February 2020, Chris livestreamed himself reading the second half of a fanfic, SNT vs. Solitude, written by OpusCon 789, which involved Chris and Project SNT. Chris got the idea from Project SNT's YouTube, where she had livestreamed a reading of the first half 10 months before. The fanfiction is an edgy story, an example of which is it began making further unfortunate implications when it began turning sexual despite the significant age gap between Chris and SNT. Chris's rewatch of her redesigns. In March of 2024, during a live stream where Chris watched some of his favourite videos, he rewatched the video by Courtney where she redesigned the chaotic combo. Chris seemed to enjoy her video. At this point in time, and despite having some feedback and corrections about her observations on the characters, was overall positive or at least not openly negative and hostile about her designs. Hooray, ladies and gentlemen. Thank God for that. Oh, that was just annoying. It's annoying because, listen, I can understand Chris not being happy at the designs. You know what? Fair enough. If they're not to Chris's liking, then you know what? Maybe he has his own logic. What I can't get my head around, however, is why Chris not only needed to drag this as long as he did, why Chris kept changing his rationale. Chris, you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. But at the same time, Project SNT wasn't doing this for any other reason than maybe it's just something she took interest in. And also, this is a recurring theme when people try and do their own fan arts and stuff like that of Chris's characters. It's that Chris can't ever just bring himself to say, that's actually really cool. I really do like that. It's not that Chris can't, it's just that Chris won't do it. I thoroughly believe Chris can do it. Unfortunately, he's never really done it before, and I don't really feel as if push comes to shove, Chris would have wanted to do it anyway. You may say that sounds incredibly childish and petty on the point of Chris. Well, That's just the measure of what we're dealing with here. So with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see all of you guys again next time. Thank you.